Hi, I'm Jessica Stegner, travel consultant and author of From Paper to Plane, a step-by-step guide to efficiently plan your vacations abroad. What's the most common mistake that I see people make when they're planning their trips? It's trying to do too much in the time that they have. I know, it's so easy to make that mistake. I even struggle with it when I'm planning my own trips. It's so easy to just cram in one more thing here or there. But today, I'm going to take you through a section of my book and talk about how you can avoid this mistake. In my book, I have a chapter about creating a realistic itinerary as opposed to one that is just overwhelming. And in it, I'm going to give you some rules that you need to follow in order to make sure that you avoid this mistake. And then if you were to get my book, I'm not going to cover this today, but I do have steps for making the itinerary afterwards. But let's go through the rules first, and then I'll dig into each one. So rule number 1, plan for enough days in each location. Rule number 2, the longer your trip, the slower you travel. Rule number 3, fly open jaw. Rule number 4, break up big cities. And rule number 5, decrease transportation time. So let's talk about rule number 1. Plan for enough days in each location. So I like to set kind of number rules on these. So what I like to say is if I'm going to a bigger city, I'm going to spend a minimum of 3 nights there. And if I'm going to a smaller town or rural village, I'm going to spend 2 nights there minimum. Now, if I spend 3 nights in a big city, that gives me 2 full days of exploring in the city, which actually doesn't seem like a lot, but that's why it's a minimum, okay? Now, if you are going to a city and you know that there are like a ton of sites that you want to see, it's definitely going to be more than 3 nights. So say, for example, that you want to go to Paris and you know that you want to go to the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame, and you want to walk around Montmartre and you want to go to the Orsay Museum and you want to do all of these things. You do need to make sure that you have enough days for that. So one way that I like to calculate that is by giving myself no more than 1 or 2 of those big sites per day. So for example, if there were 7 big sites, like time-consuming sites that you wanted to see somewhere, you would give yourself a minimum of 4 full days in that city. And now if you have 4 full days, it's not 3.5 days, 4 full days, that means that you would have to have 5 nights there. So you'd be back to back with 5 nights. So a great way to start is by looking at a list of the sites in a city that you want to visit and just, counting them up and then dividing it by 2. Or you could always have more days than that, but that would be the bare minimum. Okay. So minimum of no less than 3 nights in a city, no less than 2 in a rural area. And if you have more sites that you want to see somewhere, list them out, no more than 1 or 2 big things per day. Okay. Rule number 2, the longer your trip, the slower you travel. Now, if you're only traveling for like a week or a week and a half, you can move at a little bit faster of a pace and be not get exhausted. If you're traveling for longer than 2 weeks though, it's really exhausting to only be spending a few nights in each place. So it's best to slow down in that situation. So spend a full week somewhere in those 3 weeks, or 2 weeks somewhere, if there's a lot of things to do and see there. Just slow down and relax. It's your vacation and you want to enjoy more things than just hitting the museums and then going to the next place. So slow down on the longer trips. It's so hard, I know, but you got to do it. Rule number 3, flying open jaw can save you a lot. So if you fly into one city and out of another, your itinerary, your trip can move you just kind of in a line this way. Whereas if you were going to fly in and out of the same city and you were going to go here and here and here and here, then you have to loop back and fly that way. So unless that flight's going to save you a ton of money, which it usually won't, I recommend flying in and out of 2 separate cities that are good transportation hubs so you can get good flights. Now, rule number 4, break up big cities. I see a lot with people, especially when people are going to Europe specifically for the first time. Like, okay, I want to see London. I want to see Paris. I want to see Rome. I want to see, like, they list all of the biggest cities and then they make that their itinerary. But I've had some of my best travel experiences in some smaller towns or more rural areas throughout the trip. And I find them really refreshing along the way too, because cities can be a little exhausting. There's just so much to see and do, and you're walking on pavement and there's traffic and there's all this and all that. And they're expensive too. But if you're going from, like one place to another, make some decisions about some stops along the way. Like if you're going from Rome to Venice, maybe you want to stop along the way in Tuscany and do some wine tasting and stay at an agriturismo and just relax a little bit, right? Within your trip. Rule number 5, decrease transportation time. So I think that it's really important before you start really booking things to know the travel distances of your different destinations on your itinerary so that you don't get stuck with having to be on trains or in planes the entire trip. So one website that I recommend a lot to go to is Rome to Rio, and it's the number 2, rometorio.com. And on this website, you can enter in like your starting city and the next place that you want to be, and it'll show you all of the different options for trains, buses, driving, planes, of getting to that other location. It'll give you kind of some prices, what you might be looking at. The most important thing for me is the timing. So I see sometimes people on their itineraries will plan, okay, I'm going to go here and then 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 here. Like, oh my God, you're going to be in airports the entire time, or you're going to be on these like overnight trains the entire time. Like, why not just loop this way like this? And then you'll just go for 4 hours and then 2 hours and then 1 hour, like just make your little stops along the way instead of just zigzagging and hitting all these places. That might mean cutting somewhere out. Like we once had a trip where we started in Rome, then we went to Siena, Florence, and then over to Cinque Terre before heading to France, southern France. Well, we originally wanted to go to Venice on that trip, but it was too far out of the way. It didn't make sense. So we cut it out of that trip and we said, we'll go another time. And you know what? We did. A few years later, we went another time. So, it's hard. I know it's so hard to cut things out, but you have to be firm sometimes in order to make sure that you have not your entire trip being in airports and trains. So if you follow those rules, it'll really help you from making that most common mistake. If you pick up my book, which, like I said, is available on Amazon, both Kindle and paperback, then you'll know that in this chapter, I also then give you these steps that I like to have people follow when they're making their itinerary, just like a step-by-step guide that will kind of incorporate all of those into there. So I'm curious about you and your traveling, if you have had an experience where you went on a trip that was just way too packed, and I would love to hear about it. So comment below if this was an experience that you had. And you know what? Maybe you had a totally packed trip and you had a blast. I'd love to hear about that too. So either way, let me know. And then if you want to find more free resources or information about me, then you can go to my website, wegetouoftown.com. I have a blog, tons of downloadables, some email signups. And that's also where you can contact me if you want any personal consultations for your trips. Like if you want me to look over your itinerary or anything like that, that's where you'd contact me. All right, comment below about your experiences with packed itineraries, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.